Hey everybody, welcome to Fridays with Steve. We're going to start our tour of some kind of industry or domain specific discussions. I pulled together some different types of content and some things I want to talk about specific to defense, intelligence, and all those industries that are adjacent. There's some really interesting things kind of going on right now that are uniquely affecting that space, but also at the same time providing some unique opportunities. I'll even kind of flavor the end of the discussion with a little bit of our experience and moving into this space. And so I'm going to talk about Microsoft and government and a little bit about the Windows 365 solution. That's a really interesting solution in this space. I think a lot of you are probably really familiar thinking about it from a commercial standpoint and simplification, but in the defense industrial base, it really creates an interesting way to tackle some really challenging security and compliance issues. We'll also talk a little bit about CMMC. It's important and will continue to gain importance all throughout the supply chain. And so it's definitely worth knowing about. There's training and sort of practice or sort of practitioner sorts of levels to it that I think everyone needs to understand. We'll talk a little bit about purview in the scope of government and sort of, I didn't know exactly, DIB or the defense industrial base, government adjacent, kinds of industries and organizations. And then, like I said, we'll talk a little bit about our move into this space and how we can help. So, I put this slide up a lot in the commercial context or in the nonprofit or organizational context. This is more of an agency and defense industrial based sort of view. A lot of the same same pressures, move to the cloud, remote and hybrid work, facing, IT talent shortages, and it's sort of unique in the Fed space and the government adjacent space is that, there are additional constraints. In one of my previous lives, maybe really kind of my first experience with this, was we were doing some contract work for Boeing. And it was the first time I ever had the U.S. citizen requirement for consultative talent. And we were able to fulfill that. But, I had not assembled my organization at Hewlett Packard with sort of that in mind. And so it's sort of the first, creep in of those additional challenges around talent in this space. And so, it's really focused on, all the things that make sense in the commercial space for federal agencies. And I'm using this kind of talk track to bring in everyone that's sort of defense adjacent, right? We'll all recognize these kinds of imperatives as being important ones when it comes to being able to deliver services and deliver the business continuity, the organizational continuity that everyone wants and needs, but doing it in a safe and secure way. And so Windows 365 government is a really, really interesting solution in this space, right? Well, what happens to your ability to deliver on the requirements when you take that entire footprint into being a cloud PC, right? All of a sudden, it's bring your own device. It is, centralized patching and updates and control and monitoring and managing. It is, infinitely scalable in the sense that, you can expand your scalability from 50 to 500 to 5,000 seats incredibly easily, simply by adding more capacity in the cloud. And this is both GCC or the Government Community Cloud and GCC-H or GCC High as it's typically referred to, which is the higher security enforcement level. So GCC High is where those sort of core defense organizations are going to live, 100% completely partitioned clouds. And we're even having, so I talked about that. I'd mix in some of the Apex story here. We have clients that are moving to and are in GCC high, and it's a different beast. And what's been nice is now we've developed a robust skill set around understanding GCC high. And so when you bring these pieces together, right, when you take the cloud PC and then you take, the apps that are hosted in GCC or GCC high, the identity solutions, the Defender solutions, and Intune, you're really talking about a relatively simple way to address all these requirements, all the compliance pieces, and all of these things, as you're going to see here in a couple of slides, are just continuing to ramp. No pun intended. Thinking about FedRAMP. They're going to continue to grow because the probability of loss here, is oftentimes measured in dollars, but it also can be measured in other ways. Usually that we think about being based in movies, and so. You can protect those environments, deliver zero trust, in a way with Windows 365 for government that is, centrally manageable and scalable. You can operate those legacy applications in a controlled way and meet CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. One of the things historically I feel like we've always done in this ecosystem is carry those legacy applications forward, but then have had this evolving strategy of, at first it was like operating system level compatibility, and then it was sandboxing, and then it was, isolation, and then it's being able to even use things like VMs or cloud PCs to say, hey, your environment has moved forward, but we're going to just slice off this little tiny piece to do this legacy app. And so the cloud PC solution, the Windows 365 solution, continue to deliver on that. And, from the federal view looking out, or as someone in the DIB looking in, you've got that extension of security and of that footprint out to contractors and consultants and subs and all those kinds of things. Again, thinking back to my time at HP, the same consulting force we had at Boeing was also required to use Boeing laptops. And so, this is sort of the modern version of that. Hey, I'm not going to have to procure and endpoint manage, a physical device for a contractor. But what I can do now is simply allocate a cloud PC and say, hey, you get to it however you like. But once you get to my operating environment, I completely control it. And so, from end to end, that secure by design in Windows 365 is immensely, immensely powerful. And so then, it talks about unifying the ability to manage all these people, the desktop, the settings, the content, right? Nothing, sort of leaves a footprint behind, whether it's end users and being able to, have a familiar Windows experience, for the agency, or for the organization in the defense industrial base. You can adopt to some of these hybrid scenarios, right? In the old days, it was, physical separation of networks and rooms within buildings. The greatest example to me, I think, is still the U.S. Navy. That, the only way that they figured out to keep, the top secret network separate from everything else is to literally separate it, right? There are parallel everythings, including, terminals and rooms you go into based on the classification of information. This sort of gives you the ability to have that, but embrace some of the hybrid scenarios, the distributed scenarios that are, sort of the real world for all of us, right? And you You can leverage the cloud. I remember some of my early cloud discussions with commercial customers where I would say, "Hey, you're worried about security, but if the NSA is using Azure and AWS, the security footprint can be there." And with Windows 365, it really enables you to get to that relatively quickly. So I mentioned a couple of these, interesting scenarios that are unlocked with the Windows 365 for government footprint, things like bring your own PC, right? Like work where you want to work because, hey, you're on my PC in the cloud doing your actual, agency work or DIB work and things like that. You can scale up and down temporary workforces, contractors and subcontractors. Lots of different scenarios are unleashed by introducing this footprint. And so it's a great solution. We talk a lot about it in the commercial space. I feel like the uptake in the commercial space is always a bit slower. I think there's just a sort of a lot of momentum or a lot of inertia with everybody has their own laptop, and this is kind of how we manage things, versus moving everyone to cloud PC. But in this scenario, it's particularly useful. And then, with Copilot and everything that surrounds Copilot and all the talk and noise, I mean, you've got the ability to keep the endpoints for Copilot, the endpoints for AI within this secure and managed environment. And so because of that, I think it becomes a little bit less scary when it comes to leveraging AI within an environment like that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about CMMC. I've already alluded to it a couple of times. Let's just talk about what it is and what the implications are. And so CMMC is a certification that was launched by the DoD, meant to sort of validate that everyone's doing the things they need to do, the best practices, the processes that get you as cyber secure as humanly possible. We talk about the dollar footprint, and every time I just see different, massively large, hard to comprehend numbers around here, $10 trillion. But it's also, it's protecting that data, protecting that information, as well as protecting its value. And it's going to affect everybody. And it's slowly, this is a very US centric talk, right? It is emanating from the core of the US government, from DoD, and it's emanating out. Some of the customers that I'm thinking about that we're working with, they're one of the compelling things that they have to do to get this is to move to GCC or to move to GCC High, move out of the commercial clouds and into the government community clouds. And so, we're seeing that those rings of effect move out each and every day. And so there's an accreditation board, very government approach, whether it's NIST or ISO. CMMC kind of takes that same approach. And so it is both moving fast and slow, I guess, in a sense, in that I feel like it's kind of fast from a government perspective, but it's kind of slow when you think about, how quickly maybe a commercial enterprise will see a project go from beginning to end. You've got to go under an assessment to get the different certifications. It's got to be reassessed every 3 years. We'll talk a little bit about compliance. And it's, like I said, it's emanating out from the core to everyone in the DIB, including supply chain tentacles that probably reach further than people might expect, right? The bolt that ends up in the wheel, that ends up in the tire assembly that goes on, a combat vehicle. Eventually it's all going to leach out all the way. And so Microsoft's pitch is really that, the trusted clouds they build, are built on these pillars and can meet all of those requirements. I'm sure a lot of us have seen, the back and forth between Microsoft and Amazon and cloud contracts with the government and so forth. really no comment about that process, but just this is a very, very big and important business to all the players in the space, GCP as well. And so, it is in their best interest to make sure that they have the best stuff around. And so I mentioned FedRAMP, I mentioned NIST, I mentioned ISO. Microsoft really tracks all of these sort of compliance and regulatory hurdles that they have to get over, right? And so, what you can see in that line for the U.S. government is a lot of footnote 2, and you can see, you have to get into those GCC clouds, GCC High, or even the DoD cloud to start to get some of those kinds of things. I'm sure a lot of us, well, I shouldn't say that. I in my position and some of the customers I work with are always tracking, hey, something new in Teams, when is it on the roadmap? When does it land in sort of the, accelerated adoption ring? When does it land in commercial cloud? When does it land in GCC, right? Again, a different previous life. I spent a lot of time talking to sort of business decision makers and Lighthouse, users of Teams when it was new, and it was always I was always having to tailor my conversation based on the audience, whether they were, federal employees or a commercial entity, simply because some of the features were very different, especially at that time. I think the pitch for this information really applies to all of us, which is, where does the responsibility lie when you're talking about these different models when it comes to regulatory and compliance, risk management, and, obviously on-prem, it's all on you, right? Software as a service, hey, the data, the classification and accountability, that is all on you. Client and endpoint protection, identity access management, we share. Everything else is on the cloud provider. And one of the fun things that's fun in the Compliance Center with Microsoft is, for whatever reason, M&A due diligence or a regulatory filing, or you trying to meet a compliance standard, Microsoft has got lots of documentation on, say, like Exchange Online and how it meets all these different regulations, the exact sort of like RFP responses that you need to say, hey, I'm compliant, I use Exchange Online, and here's Microsoft's documentation on it. What's left to you are your apps, your infrastructure, all those kinds of things. And so I think for all of us, this makes a case for sharing that compliance accountability with providers. They do it for a lot of people at scale, which makes them very good at sort of the accounting of it all. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and I think I'll leave a few of these slides kind of as a whirlwind tour. If you want the deck, please just reach out, sthompson@apexdigital.com. And so Purview fits in this space by really giving you some tools to do 3 different things, right? Understand and govern your data, safeguard data wherever it lives, data at rest, data in motion, and then that compliance posture, which I talked a little bit about already. And so the Purview footprint in, the DIB is super, super critical. Here are the Purview capabilities to the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? And so, if you're forced or tasked or choose to snap to this framework and how you think about cybersecurity, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, Microsoft does a good job of saying, hey, here are the tools that help you, get to where you want to be in each one of those categories. So let's talk a little bit about understanding and governing data. So the Purview data map, it's a graph that describes the data assets and their relationships across all of your data, automated data scanning, classification, 200 plus built-in data classifiers, and support for 35 data sources and growing. So it all starts with understanding what data's out there. Building the catalog, to say, hey, where is the data in my environment? Be able to make recommendations and visualization of lineage. Hey, where is this flowing from? It comes from this database, gets transformed here, resides here, ends up as output here. And so the data catalog forms that foundation for your environment. And then insights, right? I think all of us, like to see this sort of this tally and this reconnaissance on what's out there, from MCAS or Defender for Cloud telling you, hey, here's all the traffic coming and going, to applications, say like Dropbox or SAP or something like that you didn't know exists. Kind of taking that same approach with data, right? Let's explore your entire environment and its data assets, make a catalog, and be able to provide you insights out of it. So data at rest, data in motion, right? Purview has tools and capabilities that are really, really strong in this space. Information protection, labeling, kind of the history of this tool to, discover and classify data at scale using automation and machine learning, right? So this is the advanced capability here in information protection to say, hey, does it look like a social security number? Does it look like a contract number? Does it have a keyword in it that is a code word project, right? Being able to label and then protect that information based on the rules you set, right? What does top secret mean? Well, top secret means it's encrypted and it can't be offline with access for more than 48 hours and and you set all of those rules to say, hey, now it's labeled. Great. What are we going to do with it? Right. And it protects these things wherever they go. That's one of the fun things about information protection is that, that document ends up on an unmanaged endpoint. It carries that protection with it. I love talking to people about DLP, writing those policies that, just in anecdotal or sort of, regular English, make sense. Hey, don't let anybody email an attachment that has, more than 10 lines of financial information or the names of all of our assets in, Blankistan, and don't let that leave the environment, right? I think all of us, I've talked about this a lot. We all have policies, if we're not doing DLP, that we can imagine putting in place, in the commercial space. Hey, don't let anyone outside of finance email more than 2 credit card numbers in an attachment. If they do, block it, send a note to their manager, and copy the IT team. And then insider risk management, the same is true in the defense industrial base and with the agencies as it's true in the commercial space. A lot of these problems come from within, whether they're malicious or sort of errors of omission or ignorance. And so integrated tools to say, hey, do my users or are my users engaging in risky behavior? Let's learn what risky behavior looks like, because what's risky for one may not be risky for another. I had sort of a facts of life flashback there. Sorry. Maybe it's totally normal for person A to make mass deletes on SharePoint each and every day. It's kind of weird that person B did it on this random Tuesday, the day before the close of our fiscal year. Let's take a look at that. And so insider risk management, super powerful tool across all of us. And then I talked about it, risk and compliance manager, kind of taking that secure score approach to say, hey, here's your score. Here's how you're going up and down. Here are the things that we think are important, and you can dismiss, or you can say, yeah, that is something that's important to me. And it really gives you a real tool to make that assessment over time. I think that's one of the critical things that we're getting better at in our spaces. I kind of think about it in life too, is that I do or I've done and continue to be involved a lot in sort of like youth and amateur sports. And one of the things that we figured out is that me being trained on like concussion protocols and so forth has value, but what has more value is setting that young athlete's baseline, right? Because it's really about how different they are. Like take an example like me. If I got a concussion and couldn't do math tomorrow, well, the real question is, well, can I do math today, right? Like what's the change? And compliance manager kind of gives you those tools to be able to say, hey, is this deviating from where I've been? Is this better? Is this worse? And so having that relative score is super, super critical. Communication compliance, hey, are there things people are saying or doing in sort of that communication layer, Teams IMs that is, risky or actionable or, subject to litigation or, information holds and things like that. Again, I think in the commercial space, we think of like who used naughty language in an IM. This is more who talked about a project or who talked, hey, wow, these people don't usually communicate. Interesting. What are we going to do with that? So sort of that situational awareness as employees and agencies and in the defense industrial base communicate. And then e-discovery, right? To say, all right, now we need the data. How do we go get it, right? I have a family that worked in a FOIA role for her entire career, 30 years, really starting with going to the filing cabinet, right? It's a different world now. These are digital assets. So these are tools that help you, fulfill those requests, be able to get into the data, bring it together based off of, whatever that central point is. Is it a person? Is it a day? Is it a location or something like that? And be able to really bring all those assets together. And so we can help in this space. All the things I've talked about are things we're very, very familiar with, including GCC and GCC High. Over the last 18 months, we've really moved into the space and have the ability to license, to create solutions, to deliver solutions, to partner with other experts, to bring the solutions home in this specific space. It's a really unique skill set. We've even had some large organizations kind of turn around and come to us simply because we have the knowledge in the space. And so reach out. Let's book a meeting. You can always reach out to me or my team, sthompson@apexdigital.com, or just email sales@apexdigital.com. We're ready to help. I can provide these slides and other information and references directly. Also check out our website. We continue to grow sort of our industry approach to relating communication out to the market and be able to talk specifically about your needs because you're in banking, you're in the defense industrial base or whatever your domain might be. So that's it for this Fridays with Steve. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.